ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पाद शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। गुकारस्त्वन्धकारश्च ऋकारस्तन्निवर्तकः अन्धकारनिरोधित्वाद् गुरुरित्यभिधीयते। सदाशिवसमारम्भाम् शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। We are in this camp doing the last section, or the last third of the 18th chapter of the Gītā. And the section that we have begins from the verse 41, going on up to then, that is verse 78. All these verses we actually planned to do in the last camp, but we did not complete them, and so we are going ahead in this camp. These are the verses that talk about the concept of duty, and it is based on the vyavastha, or the arrangement, or the organization of the whole society based on the caste. For those who attended the last camp, it may be a bit of a repetition, but for the rest of you, I will just reiterate briefly what it is that we discussed before we proceed with our discussion here. And also, we were saying last night that in the Vedic times, the society was organized on the lines of the caste. Chaturvanyam maya sustam guna karma vibhagashaha. Lord Krishna says in the 4th chapter that I have created this Chaturvanyam, this humanity or society consisting of 4 varnas or 4 castes. Guna karma vibhagashaha, where there is a division of the functions to be performed in society, and that division is based on the guna, on the disposition of the minds of the people. And thus, in the Vedic times, these 4 primary or the major dispositions were recognized, and the functions that are to be performed for running the whole society were then assigned to the different people according to the dispositions of their mind. So this was the idea, and each of this division was called a caste. So let me just show here this caste and the nature of those, the different members of the caste here. First of all, just to remind you about the gunas, or what we call the disposition. Guna are the 3 dispositions, sattva, rajas and tamas, where sattva stands for clarity. And therefore, freedom from the impurities of rajas and tamas, the mind has clarity, and therefore, mind enjoys a tranquility. in a mind such as that, there is naturally a love for knowledge, mind such as that is also cheerful in nature. Cheerfulness. This is the nature of sattva, of which our mind is made up. And in nature also we find sattva, so there we find peace and tranquility. So we find very often we come across an atmosphere where we find a tranquility or purity and peace. So that is the sattvic atmosphere. Or when we enjoy the disposition of mind, it is the sattvic disposition of mind. Or so, thus sattva, let us call it balance. Rajas is characterized by agitation, and therefore activity. And here there is love for pleasure. Instead of cheerfulness, there is restlessness. There is a keen sense of one's own sense of limitation. So this is rajas. And tamas is dullness. Therefore, inaction. So, there would be what we may generally call a selflessness or an attitude of there is going to be a selfish attitude. There is no sense of inadequacy, sense of insecurity. The sattvic person generally feels good about himself, and therefore we find him generosity, charity and spirit of offering in him. A person with rajas experiences a keen sense of inadequacy and therefore insecurity, and then we find a self-centeredness, in him. And a person with tamas doesn't feel, he doesn't have motivation, and therefore we don't find even self-centeredness there, we just find dullness, inactivity, lack of motivation. And when tamas increases, it may get distorted to even cruelty. The mind, in fact, is made up of these three dispositions. Each one of us has it in different measures. Sometimes our mind is sattvic predominantly, sometimes it is rajas, sometimes tamas. But we can generally say that a given person has one of the three in predominance, and accordingly we may classify a person as sattvic, rajas or tamas. This is how it is. This is how human beings are. And based on this, then the ancient seers then recognize four broad classifications of the dispositions of human beings, and this classification, position of these people. In Brahma, there is a predominance of sattva. And then finally, tamas. Predominance of rajas, and finally tamas. A Vaishya, predominance of rajas, followed by tamas, and finally sattva. And the Shudra, in whom there is a predominance of tamas, followed by rajas, and finally sattva. This is how the disposition of these people is made up. As you can see, in Brahma there is predominance of sattva. Therefore he will be a tranquil, contemplative person in whom there will be love for knowledge, and therefore learning, studying and teaching and all those activities would be best done by this person. He is most suited for that. a Kshatriya has Rajas, is an active person. Except his activity is followed by Sattva, so it's more likely to be a person who performs activity in the spirit of service. So he is the one who therefore functions for protecting the society, for protecting dharma, for following dharma, and protecting dharma, as well as for protecting society. So he is a protector of the society. Vaishya has a predominance of Rajas, also active person, but followed by Tamas, and therefore there is self-centeredness. So here Kshatriya is more likely to be a person who is selfless. A Vaishya is is generally speaking a person whose activity is meant for his own personal good. That means, for his own personal reward. Whereas Kshatriya would be, generally speaking, performing action for the sake of the whole society. And the Shudra, because Tamas is predominant and followed by Rajas, therefore there is no motivation. He is a person, so each one of these three are the motivations. A Brahmana is generally motivated by a love for knowledge. A Kshatriya is motivated by the love for service. And Vaishya is motivated by the love of profit. And Shudra has no motivation, and therefore he has to be motivated. And so that is how these are four kinds of people that we find in any society. It is not that Indians created these divisions, that the divisions always obtained in any society, except in the Vedic times these divisions were recognized and the society was organized accordingly, so that each one of them can get a kind of a role or a function which suits their nature, and that is how they can perform their function well. In that process, the whole society also grows and the individual also grows. This was the idea. So, the four castes. Now, third thing that also we should know, how was the society organized? How are these people organized? Only two ways of a group of people functioning or interacting with each other. One is, so society can be rights. So either a person may give importance to his duties as to what he is required to do, or the person may emphasize his right as to what he should be given. And so one person emphasizes what he should give, that is a duty. Other person can emphasize what he should get, that is his right. So it depends upon how you see, whether you look upon yourself as a person with all kinds of rights and the world is required to do things for you, or you think that you are already enjoying the right and that you should do something for the world. There are two approaches, and so what approach? The Vedic approach was the duty-based. In this sense, what the duty of one becomes the right of the other. The point is that when the members of society they function on the basis of the duty, what happens to the rights? Except that what is my duty becomes your right, and what is your duty becomes my right, and that way, in a duty-based society, the rights will be served in a very gentle way, in a very giving way. That you perform your duty and therefore, without demanding, my right is served, in a non-demanding way. So in the right, naturally, there is a demand, on-demand. And therefore, in this society, there is a spirit of cooperation. There is competition. Now this duty-based society, when there is cooperation among the members of any group, there is going to be harmony. Imagine just a group of people, two persons called husband and wife. Just take this simple unit, and imagine the relationship between them. They can be duty-based or right-based, where each one thinks that, so somebody asks Swamiji, when a couple gets married, what is their duty? Say simply, the duty of husband is to make his wife happy, and duty of wife is to make husband happy. And therefore husband looks upon his duty to make sure that the wife is happy and vice versa. Then there is a spirit of giving, there is a spirit of cooperation. Whereas husband and wife each feels that it is my duty to make myself happy. Then there is the rights and demand. And can you imagine husband and wife competing with each other? I've seen it happening, And sometimes the wife feels that the husband is competing and the husband doesn't allow her to rise, So sometimes both of them met in the college, in university, someplace, and both of them belong to the same discipline. And so after getting married, then husband also may be a writer and wife also is a writer, but then somehow the wife always felt, Swamiji, that he never encouraged me. He never, he never allowed me to rise, So very often we find husband and wife competing. In a social circle also. Each one trying to draw attention of other people and stuff like that. I think you know this better than I do, but this is what I hear sometimes, Competing with each other. It's most amazing. Competing for importance, competing for the visibility, competing for a variety of things, Because husband and wife are primarily human beings also. So should they are human beings with their own needs and, requirements and whatever. So should that get importance? Or the fact that they should function as one unit, and should the welfare of the whole unit be important, or the welfare of the individual member of the unit be important? So we always draw attention to the way our body functions. How there are different limbs in the body. So there is a head which performs the function of Brahmana because the head thinks, and it learns, and it teaches. The arms perform the function of the Kshatriyas because there is strength there, and they protect the whole body. Then stomach performs the function of Vaishya because it receives and distributes. And the feet perform the function of the Shudra because it sustains the whole body. Now, the limbs are different, the names are different, the places are different, the functions are different. But shall we say they compete with each other? They don't compete with each other. In fact, they cooperate with each other. That means that they function as a unit. Not as individuals demanding their own rights and their own visibility and their own importance, but then they function as one unit. When any part of the body requires something, the whole body responds. And so, thus we find the spirit of cause. Then there is a harmony in the body. Then there is unity, because there is one self. Otherwise there are as many cells as the limbs are. And then there is no way that the body can ever function properly. So, this is how the nature also functions. So very often you point out to the people, look, if you want to learn about management, just look at the nature, look at your own body, as to how the different elements comprising the nature, how all of them function in the spirit of cooperation. So in nature also you find cooperation rather than competition. If this is so, then there is going to be harmony. What happens is, in a duty-based society, one has to submit the individual demands or individual aspiration to the aspiration of the whole. And in a rights-based society, the aspiration of the individual is important as compared to the aspiration of the whole. And therefore here, individual is submitted or surrendered or offered at the altar of the whole. And in the right-based society, the whole doesn't remain important, the individual remains important. And therefore, for even though I may be a citizen of the United States, what matters is my profit. And so I can go to XYZ country, and then I can do whatever I want, so as to make my profit, even though it may mean that I am perhaps hurting my own country. Doesn't matter. What matters is my profit, my bottom line. So, this is important as to whether a person is willing to forego his own demands for fulfilling the demands or needs of the group. But as you say, if everybody functions in that spirit, everybody is willing to forego their demands for the demands of the whole society, then automatically everybody's demand will be met. Because I also forego and you also forego as a result, every demand is met in a very graceful way. In a competing society, people try to meet their demands in a very hurtful way. And so there is going to be a violence, with the rights-based society. This is a non-violent society. Some would call it non-competing society, a non-violent society. This would be definitely a society where there is conflict in rights. To conduct our life? Are we going to conduct our life based on what we call the guidelines of Scripture, or are we going to conduct our life based on our own likes and dislikes? So that is what we call the Shastra guided, and so Shastra Prerita. So that which is in fact directed by the Shastra of the Scripture. Vasana means one's own likes and dislikes. So whether one submits one likes and dislikes to the direction of the Scripture. So what is the Shastra of the Scripture? Scripture is that which has what we may call a total view. So you can imagine a person standing at the bottom of a hill and someone standing on the top of the hill. So one standing on the top of the hill has a total view. And from there he makes his decision. This fellow standing in the bottom of the hill has a very narrow view from where he makes the decision. And therefore when I stick to my likes and dislikes and my demands and my desires, then well, whatever decisions are made, I will have made based on what I think is good for me. On the other hand, when Shastra makes a decision, it is based on what is good for everybody. And so that is what we call the Shastra Prerita. That is, that which is impelled by the Scriptures, Vasana Prerita, impelled by the Vasanas. Direct or impelled, Then again, what is the primary value? Is dharma the primary value? Righteousness becomes a primary value. Usually in the rights-based society, the artha and kama, Purusha are the four human ends, dharma, artha, kama and moksha. It is recognized that every human being needs comfort, every human being has a need for sense gratification and ego gratification, they are accepted. That artha and kama are the needs of human beings, is accepted, except that in a society where one is impelled by the Scriptures, then one fulfills one's need of artha kama based on the way one is impelled by the Scriptures, as directed by the Scriptures or guided by the Scripture, and therefore dharma becomes the basis of fulfillment of one's needs of artha and kama. Whereas when one is impelled by one's own vasanas, one's own likes and dislikes, one's own tendencies, then artha kama, meaning the security and pleasure and comfort, they become of primary importance, and it's quite possible that dharma or the well-being of dharma means the welfare of the whole. Dharma can be simply understood as the welfare of the whole. So yes, the members of society, they do pursue artha kama, comfort and pleasure, but without sacrificing the welfare of the whole. Whereas people can pursue their own ends without regard to the welfare of the whole. You can see these two models, of organizing any group. In family also, if this is the way, if children have their own rights, why mother has her own rights, father has his own rights, and that becomes important. And so with the resources available, they compete with each other, and the daughter says, I must have this, and son says, I must have this, whatever it is. And impelled by their own demands, their own vasanas and likes and dislikes, with the rights and pleasures and comfort being important, you can see it will just ruin the whole thing. There's no way that any unit really can function in a harmonious way. Whereas this is the way where the group can function in a harmonious way. This is how, suppose an organization is organized, whether it's business, industry, whatever, organized. Suppose it could be organized in this way, then all members of that industry or business or that group will be able to function in a harmonious way, in a very creative way, in a very productive way. So basically this was the duty-based, therefore non-demanding way, non-competing way, impelled by this Shastra or the Scriptures, where dharma, righteousness is important. So this was the spirit around which the society in the Vedic times was organized. Don't just think that it is a caste organization. It's not by caste. Organization is based on these principles. And then caste becomes then a structure, as to how to, in fact, practice these principles. To practice the principles, then the caste becomes a structure. It is not that you impose a caste upon the people. This is how they always look. The caste system is imposed upon the people. It's not so. What is in fact imposed is right. It is this principle. And why is it imposed? Just to bring about harmony, bring about the welfare of all beings. And yes, individual human being is a needy person. And therefore having his own needs, and therefore his own rights, and therefore his own limitations, he is more likely to be a demanding person, and therefore it is necessary that he must follow a certain discipline. And therefore this is a life of discipline here. Accept the discipline as it is demanded by the scriptures. So we just wanted to tell you the contrasting aspects of two ways that a society can function. I would think that basically the Western society as we see here is basically seems to follow what we written on the right, based on rights, based on demand, based on competition, impaired by one's own vasanas, and therefore pleasure and comfort being they're the primary one, If I give free rein to my mind, then the primary demand from myself are going to be for comfort and pleasure. And I will follow dharma or righteousness as long as it is convenient to follow. But if it is not convenient, for the sake of artha kama, I would be willing to even sacrifice the dharma. And this we find this trend, we find worldwide, unfortunately, in one way or the other. So, therefore, really speaking, for people to be happy, it is necessary that something must be done at a very fundamental level. It is not enough that we are, for material prosperity perhaps. That means to exploit a person, to extract the most out of him. I think this competition is a very successful model, to extract the most out of a person. To create in him, to impel from him, or impel in him, his spirit of greed and demand. So that is what we do. In the structure of competition, what we do is, we exploit the person. We exploit his limit, his vulnerability. Then we can always invoke greed from a person, but that's always there. And the desire for bhoga, the pleasure is always there. And you invoke that. And that is something that cannot be satiated at all, and therefore, one can never be satiated regardless of what one gets. So insatiable greed and demand for pleasure is invoked by, that we can invoke from a person, and that becomes the engine for his working and functioning, and which he may produce a lot because his needs are increasing. At the same time, he destroys himself in that very process. And so we can say that one is a life of yoga. These are the contrasting aspects of the two ways of the functioning of the society. And this was the ideal around which the Vedic society was organized. And if you see this, then we have no difficulty with any system. Caste system is not something that was in fact, as I said, created by the Vedic people. It is there in the human society. Just as in our body, there are 4 castes. My head is Brahmana, the arms are Kshatriya, the stomach is Vaishya, my feet is Shudra. And there is no reason, as I said again, if dharma and yoga is a way of life, then it is, then again, here what becomes important? Person, a society of person. And karma phala becomes important here. And counts. Where performance counts. The bottom line is karma phala. So what counts is performance. And the end result is what counts. Where karma is what I do. Karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So Lord Krishna is teaching, let karma become important to you, ma phaleshu. Let karma phala not become important to you. And so karma is a means, of course. In Mahabharata also, Yudhishthira and Duryodhana represent this too. Yudhishthira stands for the one who is devoted to dharma, to his duty, to what karma, to what he should do. To the means is devoted, whereas Duryodhana is devoted to his rights, competition, karma phala, and therefore end is important to Duryodhana, the means is important to Yudhishthira. And therefore Yudhishthira and therefore the Pandavas will be willing to accept what will be the end, to follow what we call the proper means, where Duryodhana, what is important to him is the end, and it doesn't matter what means he is to adopt. So we will find definitely a deterioration of means, and of therefore of what we call the loyalty and trust and everything else in a right-based society. Whereas here in the duty-based we find this loyalty, in this we find trust, and also we find the protection. So one is a protective society, other is a fighting society, whatever. And so we can see people coming from India, the East, have a lot of problems here. The human beings are all made of 5 elements and blood and flesh, but then it is a different world. The whole culture is so different, tremendously, it's a different world altogether. And if this is not understood, people really struggle very hard, not understanding what it is. But then, when a person has lived for a length of time in India and lived and has raised in a certain spirit, and when it's confronted with altogether a different kind of a spirit, becomes extremely difficult, to really adjust to that. But anyway, so these are the two ways of how a society can function, how a group can function. So with this now we can see whatever it is that Lord Krishna has to say with reference to the duties of the 4 castes. Brahmana Kshatriya Visham Shudranancha Parantapa Karmani Pravibhaktani Svabhava Prabhavair Gunaihi. Hey Parantapa, hey Arjuna, O scorcher of enemies, the inner enemies. So it is he is scorcher of outer enemies, but he should also become the scorcher of inner enemies. Brahmana, Kshatriya, Visham, Shudranam cha. Hey Parantapa, hey Arjuna, Karmani means the duties. Pravibhaktani, the duties are divided. Svabhava Prabhavaihi Gunaihi. According to guna of the disposition, that is determined by Svabhava, one's own nature. So depending upon one's own nature or one's own disposition of mind, the duties of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, the duties are divided according to their disposition, according to their aptitude, according to their capabilities, according to what they will be comfortable with. And therefore a Brahmana, a person having, although ideally as you said, the division of duties is based on the disposition of mind rather than based on the birth. But we know, of course, that the caste is decided by the birth and not by anything else. So what's the reason why caste is determined by the birth of a person? As we've been saying, birth is the nearest objective criteria to determine the disposition of mind. Because disposition of mind is a very subjective thing and then there is no way of measuring that. So we have to develop an objective criteria to determine that. And as we said, because of law of karma, the law of cause and effect, we accept that the birth is also according to the law of karma, and therefore a person gets born in a place which is appropriate for that person's disposition, and therefore we accept that, or it was accepted that a person is born in an appropriate environment, and therefore he would possess a disposition which is compatible to the environment where the person is born. So by law of karma, we take for granted the compatibility between the birth and disposition. And that's how the birth was accepted as a criterion to determine the disposition. Not a perfect criterion, but then there cannot be any perfect criterion to determine the subjective thing. We always give the example of how we always have an objective criteria to determine the subjective capability of a person. As you said, when we decide to give admission to children, in medical college or engineering college, whatever, we go by what we call the test scores. And the test scores are supposed to represent their capabilities and their aptitudes. And we know very well that it cannot always be so. Because somebody can be quite clever in scoring the test, or somebody just may not be very comfortable with the test, but he may be very good otherwise. But anyway, we have no way of judging the person's aptitude and capability. It's a subjective thing. And therefore, we have to come up with the closest objective criterion. And therefore, test scores become the closest objective criterion to determine whether a person is suitable for being a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or whatever. And similarly here also, birth therefore is the closest objective criterion. This is how Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, a person's caste, is determined by birth. Lord Krishna says that the duties of all these different members of society are divided according to their capabilities, according to their disposition, according to their aptitude. So understand, all along we find in Bhagavad Gītā, in two places Lord Krishna mentions this. In the 4th chapter also Lord Krishna mentioned, Chaturvarnyam maya sustam guna karma vibhagashaha. Here Arjuna, I have created this arrangement of 4 castes where the duties are divided according to guna and karma. The duties, karmas, are divided into guna or according to the disposition of the person. Here also Lord Krishna says, Svabhava prabhavaihi grunahi. Svabhava is the nature that one inherits at the time of birth, which is determined by again his past karma, the past history, and thus everybody is born with a certain nature. Depending upon yatha karma, yatha shrutam, the kind of karma that one has performed, the kind of intentions one has entertained, kind of meditations one has performed, all of that determines the disposition of a person when a person is born. And that's the reason why you find everybody having a unique disposition, because everybody has a unique history. So that's called svabhava. And therefore we related this svabhava. How Brahmana is a svabhava of predominance of sattva, followed by rajas. Kshatriya is a svabhava, predominance of rajas, followed by sattva. Vaishya is a svabhava, predominance of rajas, followed by tamas. And Shudra is a svabhava, predominance of tamas, followed by rajas. Now we can continue with what is really the disposition of a person who can be called Brahmana. Go to the next verse, verse 42. Shamo damastapasyaucham, shamo damastapasyaucham, kshantirarjavamevacha, kshantirarjavamevacha, jnanam vijnanamastikyam, jnanam vijnanamastikyam, brahma karma svabhavajam, brahma karma svabhavajam. Brahma karma svabhavajam, the duty of the Brahmana born of nature. Shamaha, damaha, tapaha, shaucham. This is not really duty. This verse more describes the nature of a Brahmana rather than the duty. The duties are different. But here, what will the nature of a person who is predominant in sattva? You find that person, shamaha. That is the tranquility of the mind. Shamaha means shanti. Peace or tranquility of the mind. That means a person's mind is free from demands, free from attachment, aversion, free from conflicts. Person's mind is at rest, enjoys the composure, free from inner conflict. The conflicts are there when there are many demands, many desires, and sometimes desires are fulfilled and they result into what we call greed. When desires are not fulfilled, they result into what we call anger. And therefore usually the kama, krodha and lova, there is a desire and anger and greed, are the predominant, are the tendencies of the mind, which is what keeps the mind in conflict. So one whose mind is free from these conflicting aspects, he enjoys shamaha or tranquility of the mind. So person with sattva, from which the rajas and tamas are, rajas and tamas are minimized, and therefore a clarity, cheerfulness, peace is there, shamaha. He enjoys the tranquility of the mind. He has therefore a mastery over his own mind. Damaha is discipline. Discipline of the senses. So this person also is a disciplined person. His organs of perception, organs of action, all of them also are in alignment with his mind. And therefore you don't find restlessness at the level of organs of action or organs of perception. They also follow him. The idea is that his whole personality is very cooperative. In the 6th chapter, Lord Krishna said, Atmaiva Shyatmano Bandhuhu, Atmaiva Ripuhu Atmanah. One's own mind or personality can be one's friend, and one's own mind can be one's enemy. Here is the person for whom the mind is his friend, and therefore mind is available to him for what he or she wants to do. So Damaha, a person who enjoys a composure at the level of activity also, at the level of perception and level of activity. So freedom from any indulgence and things like that. Then tapaha, austerity. You find this person austere person also. Because his needs are see, if you're satisfied with your own self, then your needs from the external world are necessarily few. So more dissatisfaction there is, more discomfort there is within, then more requirements that are without. And more comfort is within, then less requirements are without. Therefore, here we find a person who is contented. And therefore, with very few needs and very few demands. And therefore, his requirements are minimum. We find that his life is generally characterized by austerity. Not a spendthrift person, not a person who is indulging, but a person who enjoys and who is comfortable with austerity. Tapaha. Shaucham, cleanliness. We find also cleanliness with this person. Cleanliness is twofold, external and internal. Of course, internal cleanliness is very important. Cleanliness is intention. What is meant by internal cleanliness? Cleanliness in one's own intentions. Because very often we appear good outside, but our intention inside may or may not be in keeping with our appearance outside. A person is clean. That means person is a loving person, a giving person, a kind person. And therefore, his intentions are clean. He always means well of other people. For the simple reason that he feels happy with himself, he feels secure with himself, and therefore, there is no reason for him to hurt anybody. He is a non-hurting person, not only that, but he is always a well-meaning person, a person who means or wishes well of everybody. And see, when the mind is composed, then you are a disciplined person, you are an alert person. When an alert person, then outwardly also you are an organized person. When there is confusion inside, very often inner confusion reveals itself in outer confusion. Whereas, when you are composed within, when you are a person who is alert, outwardly also you are a well-organized person. And inside you are clean, outwardly also you are clean. So, cleanliness always is twofold. And in India, the external cleanliness is going to have a tremendous amount of importance. In terms of taking bath, in terms of washing clothes and making sure the clothes also in such a place that nobody, pollutes it. So cleanliness not in terms of dust and dirt and so forth, but cleanliness in terms of some religious pollution, that's the idea. Anyway, so shaucham, cleanliness, internal and external. Shantihi, kshama, forgiveness, large-heartedness, accommodation. He is a person who is a forgiving person, accommodating person. Because he is a non-demanding person, and therefore he accepts people as they are. He accepts that, okay, it is all right. Because since he doesn't demand for other people, it is not necessary for him that somebody should conduct himself in a certain way for his comfort. So he feels comfortable with himself, there is no demand on his part that people should make him comfortable. See, when we want that the world should make me comfortable, then I am not a forgiving person. Because when somebody does not conduct himself or herself properly, then I am at discomfort, I can't forgive. But when their conduct does not affect me, then I am a forgiving person. Fine, it's all right. Just as a mother or parent, how they forgive the child? They know this is a child. The Swami, doesn't matter, he talks like that. Just wait for a few years, he'll be all right, And so this is how, okay. And this is the kind of an attitude, or this is the kind of kindness that this sattvic person has towards everybody. Therefore, giving, accommodating person. He understands that a person is angry, a person is hurting, a person is whatever it is, not out of choice, out of helplessness. As we always say, a person compromises value, not out of choice, out of helplessness. Person gets angry, out of helplessness. He is hurting others out of helplessness. He is He compromises values out of helplessness. And so he can see that helplessness. So he is able to see the person behind the behavior. The outer behavior may be aggressive, outer behavior may be imposing, outer behavior may be hurting also, but this person can penetrate through that behavior and see the person. That fellow is insecure, he is himself hurt, he is very worried inside and he is fearful, and that insecurity inside shows up as outward aggressiveness. So you can see that, and that is how there is a natural compassion. So the kshama, or the forgiveness or accommodation, arising out of a genuine compassion that he has for people. Kshanti, arjavam, straightforwardness. Very straightforward person. And so, as the thought, so the words. As the words, so the deeds. Manasyekam, vachasyekam, karmanyekam, mahatmanam. Manasyanyat, vachasyanyat, karmanyat, anyat, duratmanam. There is one saying in Sanskrit which says, for Mahatmas, for the great people, what is in the mind is in the words, what is in the words is in the action. And for the crooked people, wicked people, something else in mind, something else in speech, something else in action. Arjavam, straightforwardness. Basically, what is his thought is his word, and that is his action. Honesty, also we can say, jnanam, knowledge. Jnanam is knowledge of scriptures here, because a Brahmana was the person who studied the scriptures, and study and teaching, learning and teaching various duties. So jnanam, we find he's a well-informed person or learned person with reference to scriptures. Vijnanam is to practice what he knows also. So jnanam is one thing, vijnanam is another thing. Vijnanam is the accepting the knowledge and assimilated knowledge. That's the translation here. Meaning that the knowledge is something that is practiced in his life. Or you can say that jnana meaning to know the Vedas, to know the rituals and chanting and the codes of conduct, and the vijnanam, also the skill or the ability to perform those rituals and follow those values. In case of Upanishad, jnana would mean the knowledge of Brahman, and vijnanam would mean that becomes a reality for the person. Jnanam, vijnanam. Astikyam, he is a believer, he is a faithful person or a believer in the veracity of the Vedas and God. So naturally, a person who is sattvic has a natural faith or a natural reverence for the scriptures, he has natural reverence for God, a natural reverence for sages and saints and great people. His heart has a natural reverence. So, we can say astikyam, a reverence for the scriptures, a reverence for God, a reverence for the teachers. Jnanam, vijnanam, astikyam, brahma karma svabhavajam. This is the nature, although it says duty, in fact this is the nature of a Brahmana. What are the duties of Brahmana? Duties were sixfold. Adhyanam, adhyapanam, yajnah, yajanam, danam, pratigrahascha. The duties of Brahmanas were considered to be adhyanam, study of the scriptures, adhyapanam, teaching. So he is the one who studies the scriptures, knows what dharma is, and he teaches the people also about their dharma. This is a very important duty. People must be in fact taught. People must be also informed about what is dharma, what's the right thing to do. So Brahmana studies dharma and teaches dharma. Studies the scriptures and teaches them. Adhyanam, adhyapanam. Yajnah, yajanam. Yajna is performance of the rituals and religious ceremonies, and yajanam, officiating in performance. So he himself performs the yajna, the religious ceremonies and rituals, and also officiates in performance of the ceremonies. So he makes others also perform them. He performs them himself, makes others also perform. Danam pratigrahascha. There is always a generosity in a sattvic person. Danam is a person, he is a generous person. That means the charity. Giving also is his nature or duty. Pratigraha is also allowed to receive the gift. So giving the gift and also the privilege of receiving the gift. These six are said to be the duties of a Brahmana. And his nature is described in the verse 42. His duties are recognized to be this is a Brahmana. Then we go to Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra in that sequence. We will continue in the next class. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Vadarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmedi Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om